Avowed, I think it looks great. I think it has potential. Some people say that I'm definitely huffing that copium, and maybe that is true. And maybe when it comes out, it's gonna be garbage. I personally hope it's gonna be amazing. I personally hope it's gonna be that RPG that we deserve. But if in case it's bad, well, I'm gonna say it's bad.
Salutations, everybody. It is Maddie here today. I hope all of you who celebrated yesterday, 4th of July, had a wonderful Independence Day. Today,
I had fun seeing Americans dunk on the stupid island called Britain. It was fun, yes.
we're sitting down to talk about Avowed. We have a brand new interview from Windows Central. We have new details here, as well as some clarifications on some things surrounding Avowed itself. And I'm really excited to get into this because, as I talked about in our previous Avowed video, the game is really shaping up, so more information is more than welcome. Let's dive into this interview. But first, it's not just...
The game is shaping up pretty nicely. I especially like the fact that when first Avowed came out, I said, well, it could be decent, but the combat looks terrible. And then they changed the combat, and now it looks better. Now, admittedly, combat still seems the weakest part of the game. It doesn't feel that impactful. It seems good, and I don't think there's too much to change to make it actually pretty good. But, hey, I like seeing improvements. I like seeing improvements.
time for Avowed, might be time for a new watch. The following video is
Yeah, no one cares. No one cares. Hey, if you wanna buy a watch and go try to LARP as XQC, go ahead. Be a loser. I don't care.
Late earlier this year, the response from the community was divided. Many believe the combat in Avowed seems stiff and unresponsive, and a ton of feedback was leveraged toward Obsidian Entertainment in the following weeks. Apparently, this didn't come as such a huge shock to the studio. Sometimes you can lose sight of the importance of the prioritization of some things, Gabe Paramo told me. We thought Avowed was good enough to show as is. A lot of that stuff we knew we were going to get to before shipping. Obsidian had always intended to revisit the combat and mechanics later in development, but the feedback from the game's developer direct appearance in January accelerated the process.
Now the only thing that's left for them to do to make combat feel better is actually, add damage to things. The infamous hitting mushrooms with a sword video you probably have seen, but that doesn't feel like there's too much impact. It feels like you're just and then it dies. I want to see damage on those mushrooms and everything, by the way. If I'm burning something with fire, I want to see that fire, baby. I want to see those burn marks, skid marks, damage marks, the hell is that? Every mark. And when I swing at something with a sword, I want to see a little bit of a cut here and there. And especially after the monster dies, I want it to burn on the ground. I want it to be slashed to tiny pieces. I want its head being crushed in with a mace. I want all of those beautiful things. And I think that's the last thing that Avowed needs to do to truly feel good combat-wise.
We just went, okay, let's look at this. This is a big deal. People are noticing this. We should polish this sooner, Paramo said. We really analyzed the feeling and moment when the player swings their weapon and the moment of impact. Paramo explained how Obsidian went about improving combat in Avowed. Were there any delays? Was there any system that might have been preventing it from being immediate? We also looked at posing to give that visceral, immediate feedback. We really focused on that and the blood impacts and the VFX feedback and the audio. We basically went and looked at all the pieces that make combat feel more juicy. And I think you can already see that, right? We've talked about it extensively in our last video, but I thought it was cool that they actually acknowledged this and said, like, yeah, we saw the feedback, and so we got on it a lot faster than we previously would have. And I'm glad they did, because it's funny to see how they were kind of cool about it. Like, yeah, we'll get to it when we get to it. But for me, I saw it when this game is a ways out to now seeing it in June. I'm like, oh, this game could come out this year and I'd be totally happy with it. It looks really good. So it's amazing how they just...
It is kind of predicted that Avowed could come out actually this year, November or something like that.
Just dialed in on that one area and things really shaped up. But how about brand new details, right? Let's get a little bit into...
Bro, imagine Avowed comes out and it's actually going to succeed and it's the role-playing game you wish that Starfield was. I want that so much, not just because I want a new game, because you need to understand, I am a petty human, okay? I am the worst of the worst. I am simply evil in heart and mind and soul. I want Avowed to succeed, so that godforsaken animal, Todd Howard, gets a little bit more of that pain inside of his soul, okay? Fallout New Vegas, most critically acclaimed Fallout. The blemish on Todd Howard and his pitiful existence. And now he's using the Fallout TV show to get rid of New Vegas? Pff, loser. You will never get rid of it. It's always gonna be there. The best Bethesda game is always gonna be a game that Bethesda didn't make. And this, hopefully will be another blow to Todd. And everyone's gonna be like, can't we just give Fallout and Starfield to Obsidian? I actually don't even care if it's Obsidian. At this point, I am looking at everything made by Bethesda as in, yeah, I am excited if there's a new Fallout announced. I am excited if there's even a new Starfield announced, honestly. But as long as it's not made by Bethesda. I don't care who makes it. You can take the crack addicts across the street who are also, huffing a little bit of that good old fentanyl. I don't care. As long as it's not Bethesda, I am going to be at least excited.
To that with choice and consequence, but not in the way that I think you'd expect it to be. They continue on talking about their skill system, and it's here they say, we believe heavily in choice and consequence, so there has to be some consequences to players' choices, right? Paramo told me. If the player can just fill up all skill trees by the end of the game, what was the choice there? Immediately after, Carrie Patel joined the conversation, adding, it's not like any one choice locks you off from others. It's just that there are quite a few skills and then upgrades within those skills between the trees. Even over the course of a completionist playthrough, you won't get enough points to take absolutely every skill. You could try everything over the course of your playthrough, but you won't have all skills unlocked at once, Patel finished. It's fun.
That's cool. I like that, honestly.
Because there's been so many comparisons made to Skyrim, and I think this is the closest we can actually.
This is more like a Dragon's Dogma comparison, honestly. The idea that you have one character, and yes, you have multiple classes, and you can actually level all classes if you feel like it, but that, you still pick a class. You still have an identity. I think that's important.
Get when putting Avowed and Skyrim next to each other. It's the skill system, the way it functions. In Skyrim, you get better by doing things, and when you level up, you get perk points, and you can spend them in those skill trees, and eventually you can really get everything if you keep indulging in all of the procedural content and continuing to level up and grind and grind and grind. But the reality is, thanks to that perk system, like, you can be good at everything, but what are you exactly great at? And you get that same kind of leveling system here with Avowed. You can access all these skills, but eventually with all the upgrades you're getting, you're gonna.
Yeah, this was one, again, every time I see Magic, I talk about this. This wand, rapid fire casting drummer style of whatever this is supposed to be, is probably the absolutely weakest part of Avowed that we have seen by far.
Have to go down.
And the good part is it's not actually going to be hard to make this feel better. It just needs more impact, more girth, more everything.
A path and be good at something but great at another thing, and I like that a lot. I think I've really evolved my way of thinking when it comes to these leveling systems. I used to be very against.
Matty, please, you typically don't even think before you speak. Come on, man.
Against the whole respecking whatever you want, which I know sounds very against the player, but I think that if you don't have the consequence in the leveling system, I think it just leads to not incentivizing.
I think respecking is fine, honestly. I just think you're not supposed to be allowed to get everything. I think that's what matters. I don't think not having respecking is... It works in some games, but it fails hard, honestly, in other games.
Advising the player to really pick.
And I think this is definitely going to be one of those games where allowing a respec is actually good.
A lane, I think everyone wants nowadays, because more and more RPGs are becoming watered down. They want the jack of all trades. Like, I want to be good at magic now, but tomorrow I want to be good as a rogue. And I'm like, no, you picked the rogue class, my friend. You gotta be a rogue. Sorry. Like, I liked a little bit of the pigeonhole, but I've also evolved in that I think you can have.
What do we, by the way, think about Avowed being woke? in general. I don't think Avowed is gonna be super woke. I think it's gonna have your elements of typical diversity of or whatever. But you know, I'm looking at this character and I'm like, wait a minute, this looks breedable. That's not how woke works. Woke works like Fable. When you look at the main character and you're like, well, guess I'm gay now. This does not emphasize that at all, okay? This is still pretty good, you know? Maybe we can even remove a little bit of that top more so, you know, we get a better view. Or something like that, okay? So, I think there's no way that Obsidian is not going to do a lot of woke-ish elements, but I don't actually think that the things that are not too much in your face are a problem. I see a problem when your whole personality of a, you know, main character is like, I'm gay, and that's it. That's it. That's the whole character. Yeah, that's when it becomes a problem. But just having, for example, something like this that's a hot female cat, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. Also, they have a lot of different characters in general. This is a fish dude. There's also gonna be like a furry cat girl-ish type of character also. So I'm not even sure if this is like forced diversity or anything like this. It's kind of hard to tell because woke is a very interesting subject because we don't have a flat definition for it. So for each and every one, it's how much you are willing to accept or where you think it's actually bad. I see this and I don't actually think that this is that bad. It could turn out disastrous, but again, if it turns out disastrous, we're gonna make 50 videos about Avowed being completely garbage dumpster fire that broke my heart and dreams. And Obsidian should be punished by execution, obviously.
You can have a particular play style that can evolve over the course of a playthrough. Because, for example, I was playing Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. I respec twice during the entirety of that DLC. One time for that final boss, of course, you know, I had to do it. I had to break out the cheese build. The point being is that ability to adapt, I think, is really good for players. So, yeah, Avowed's leveling system, as we showcased last week with all of the perks and skills that you can get, is going to allow you to change things up how you like, but you can obviously move things around later on in the game, but eventually you're gonna have to pick a play style. No matter what skills you choose or gear you obtain, though, combat will ultimately become necessary. It's not going to be possible to do a completely pacifist run. You will have to engage in combat at times, Patel said. There are certainly scenarios where you can avoid it completely. In some cases, you can talk certain enemies out of an encounter. In certain cases, you'll get an additional encounter as a consequence for how you handled someone somewhere else. We want everything that we're putting into the game.
This is good because this plays into my speculation about the factions. There's going to be essentially 3 big factions, and obviously, well, 3 ways to actually finish the story on which side you wanna go with. And this kind of plays in good with what I was thinking, because from the description that we get from the factions that are going to be in this game and you can try to finish the game with, yeah, some of them should not be friends. Some of them are not going to be friends at all. Some of them are going to be very, very in each other's face, like the Institute and Railroad and Fallout 4, for example, or the Brotherhood of Steel and the Brotherhood of Steel and not the Brotherhood of Steel. You know, those things are going to work out. And when there's consequences with other factions because you're helping the faction they despise, I think that's great.
And putting in front of the player to be worth the player's time. Some of these experiences are going to be larger, some of these are going to be shorter, but all of them are distinct, Patel reassured me. None of them are copy-paste experiences. They're all content that engage the player with the world and give them a chance to roleplay their character. We put the same focus into our side content as we do our main quests. So yeah, no pacifist run in Avowed. I saw some people were a little disappointed in this. I'm just speaking from personal experience. The last time I did,
I think there's an inherent problem with pacifist runs and routes and whatnot in gaming, and that is the fact that people will choose the pacifist route unintentionally. If you see an option to not fight everything, some people will pick that. Not because they want to play a pacifist, but simply because there is an option like that and it's less of a hustle. So that's why I think that just adding a pacifist route in games is pretty bad. unless you are balancing the idea of pacifism with the idea that fighting is gonna reward you better and it's gonna give you more story, it's gonna give you more everything. I think that's a good balance, because pacifism is just press one button, get experience, congratulations, you're good. It's pretty dangerous.
Did a pacifist run in any game was Dishonored 1, when I replayed that game 4 times in a row. And I figured, why not just do a no-kill run? I think games like that really thrive in the no-kill environment. I think sprawling RPGs, even ones that are, if you will, limited in scope, like Avowed, where they're choosing a bunch of hub zones, don't need to have the pacifist run. I get why people just want to be able to play the game in literally any way, right? Because that's the strength of RPGs. You come back with all these different builds, all these different choices in mind. How am I going to handle the story? How am I going to handle the gameplay? And one of these times, years down the line, you may just want to do a no-kill run in Avowed. On the other hand, I don't remember the last RPG that supported a pacifist run, and I don't really ever aim to do this stuff. I prefer, like, maybe if I'm on, like, playthrough 7 and I've done, like, the mage, the rogue, the warrior, the dual wielder, etc., etc. Like, once I've hit all the combat ones, I might just out of sheer boredom go, let's do a pacifist run. But I'm speaking for myself. That may be different for you. But yeah, no pacifist run here. But they do emphasize there's choice. There's times that you can really get out of a scenario. We saw a little bit of that in the Xbox podcast gameplay, where the character was sneaking around, didn't kill anyone, and so they got to their quest objective and there was no fight because of that, and you got the item that you needed, versus when you had to kill everyone in that area, and we saw how that led to a fight. So the proof is in the pudding thus far, which is good to see on display. But the real quote that stuck with me when reading this entire interview was, we give our side quests and side content the same focus as our main quest. And
Good.
I love to hear that, because if I were to pluck out a random recent example, it would actually be, and this is surprising to say because I thought the remake side quests were pretty terrible, but Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has some really great side content, and that side content feels very much an important part of the main story. Like, it's built with the mindset that, like, oh, you're gonna play this stuff, and they completely take story liberties over there. They completely pack in meaningful character development. We were like, why isn't this a part of the main story, right? And I love and respect that, and I'm hoping Avowed gives us that similar feeling of, wow, that was so good, it could have been a part of the main story. And I think we can trust Obsidian when you look at, say, their
I don't know. I don't feel that everything needs to be a part of the main story. If a side story is fun and it concludes, why does it need to be a part of the main story?
side quest work. I think in the Outer Worlds was pretty good. I think you look at something even further back, of course, New Vegas speaks for itself. So I'm very excited to see what they do here with Avowed side content. We don't have romance in Avowed. I know it's something that many players love, and it's something that we very seriously talked about and considered the investment required to do it, Patel said, indicating that romanceable companions were part of Avowed's early talks. However, it wasn't
Yep, we know about that one.
meant to be. We wanted to make sure that if we were
Wait,
to
what?
include it, we included an equally meaningful non-romance path, Patel continued. If Avowed had moved forward with romanceable companions, it either would have taken
Wait, there isn't romanceable companions? And what about the furry-looking girl that instantaneously is like, ha 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 ha, Fox and Heat or some bullshit like that? What about that?
resources away from fleshing out these characters' depth in other areas, or resulted in a much longer development time for Avowed. Patel continued by stating, given how much we were investing in our companions as characters who are really tied to the central story in a way they haven't been in many of our previous games, we wanted to make sure that if we were going to do romance, we were going to do it really, really, really right, or not at all. For Avowed, we decided to focus on other aspects of our companions. I'm very interested to see the audience's reaction to this, because for me, I'm cool with this. I look at the Outer Worlds as a perfect example. I think Parvati has a very compelling...
The Outer Worlds isn't the perfect example. This is the problem. This is a huge reason why people are not actually looking at Avowed as something that could be amazing, because the Outer Worlds just was not deep enough. It didn't take enough risks. It did a lot of things, well, worse than anything that people expected.
Romance questline. You don't romance her, but it's about her romance with someone else, and it's one of the best delivered romance stories in a game I've personally experienced. Like, we're still talking about it all these years later over on things like Defining Duke. I found it
Is anyone talking about it? I haven't even heard of it.
incredibly compelling because it was unique and it came from the heart. I say this not to shame anyone who likes romance, but I think a lot of it's like a little bit, you know, what kind of energy we get from some romance in games. I don't think it's handled in a way with like a proper storytelling tool attached to it. And so I think of a game like Knights of the Old Republic, right? At the end of the day, it's kind of a love story between Revan and Bastila. And obviously you can choose not to engage in that, which makes it all the more compelling of an RPG. Like Carrie Patel said here, like you have to have as critical of a non-romance path as a romance path. But ultimately, that game is many things, but it's also a love story. And I think that's what taught me there at such a young age that like love stories can be great.
Okay, Maddie, I'm not gonna lie. I really don't want to hear about your opinions on love or women, honestly. Like, Jesus, that sounds scary, not gonna lie.
Tried to include it. Anyway, I think that's fair. When I asked how much audio the studio had recorded for Avowed and the camp, Patel laughed and told me, "You mean how much audio we are still recording to fill out all the banter in those camp conversations?" There's a lot of content and a lot of...
That's good. Okay, listen. Let's just face it, a game that's fully voiced is better than a game that's not fully voiced. This is not a hot opinion. This should not even be discussed, okay? Even arguably, in fact, even the worst voice acting could be better than no voice acting at all. That's my opinion. Now, I don't know if it's right. Well, it depends on how bad it is, but that's what I think.
Writing there, just for both the ambient moments of companions barking at each other or just talking. Some are companions reflecting on quests you've done, the events that you've seen together, the journey thus far. Some are really deeply personal moments where they're reflecting on a conflict, a fear, something that is really deep and core to their story. The camp is the primary space where the players will talk.
Okay, so we know the camp is going to be like Baldur's Gate 3. That's good. I like that idea.
Has been dedicated to. Now, wrapping things up here, Patel says, "I joined the studio in 2013 as a narrative designer on Pillars of Eternity, and I worked on the White March expansions. I was narrative co-lead on Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. There are a lot of us on the team who have personal and professional experiences with Pillars of Eternity. Then we've got folks
That's good.
who are new to the franchise or who maybe enjoyed it as players but didn't build the original games. What that allows us to do is really combine a sense of fidelity to the world that we're building with a really fresh perspective."
Okay, I think all of this talk is usually bull. We as humans don't know what makes games good. Again, I will use this example for a million times because it's one of the greatest examples, if not the greatest example that you can give when talking about this stuff. It's the fact that we don't know what makes a game good. We kind of can't understand it. Hey, graphics are important, sound design, weapons, characters, story, and all of that. But how much of that you need to actually make a good game? No one knows. World of Warcraft Classic, the original one, Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King. Arguably the three most best MMORPGs, if you consider them separate entities, that have ever existed. And everyone knows that, and everyone tries to copy them. And yet, no one has succeeded. We have literally it in front of our eyes, every detail, every aspect, everything of it. And yet, no MMORPG is managing to get as far as they did. That just means one thing, that we do not understand truly what actually makes good games good. We can't just take the... We can't just recreate it like that, because we always fail at something. Anyway, that was Mr. Matty Plays. This was Sensei. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.